Welcome to DCL talk show on DCL radio. Today is June 6th. We are into fifth week of DCL 2019. Last week, almost all games, affected by rain. Only two games happened, and the remaining all got washed out. And so, to make this week's topics interesting, we are going to discuss a little bit about World Cup and then about our games, two games that happened, and DL method. What is DL method? I'm sure at least 50% of our DCL family, they have no clue how to execute this DL method. Of course, that's including me. So, and then our regular predictions. So today I have our regular analyst Imti with me, and Avi will join very soon. Jasnit is not coming, joining today's show because he's busy with the work. With that, let me welcome Imti. Imti, welcome to the show, and Eid Mubarak to you.
Thanks, Jagan. Thanks for the wishes. And I would like to take this opportunity to wish all our fellow DCL members happy Eid and Eid Mubarak. And it's nice to be back after a week's break. Unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of games last week, but looking forward to the next week.
Okay. Avi is on too. Welcome to the show, Avinash.
Thank you very much, Jagan. Good evening to you and to Imti, as well as to everybody out there that's listening to the show. We always appreciate your support. And like Imti mentioned, yes, a belated Eid wishes to all of you.
Okay. And with that, let's quickly jump into World Cup. For some reason, I felt this World Cup is very boring. And I don't know whether you guys agree with me or not. But
boring? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I felt very boring, especially the way South Africa is playing. And I felt like South Africa is quickly dying down in cricket. And that's what I feel, and then I had better hopes on Afghanistan than what they are showing. So with that, let's discuss a little bit about Indian performance and other countries too. I'll start with Imti. Imti, your thoughts on current World Cup?
I think one of the good things is that we are able to talk about World Cup during our DCL show, and they're coinciding at the same time, so that's a good thing. And it kind of brings out discussion between cricket lovers, and that is what is exciting about this year's World Cup. So, just going into the details of this tournament, I think you mentioned it as boring, but like Avinash said, I don't think it is boring. But maybe the fact that it is happening immediately after the IPL tournament, people are used to that quick T20 format so much that now 50 overs is kind of looking a little boring. But again, like looking at the results and how teams have been performing, there is no clear winner on any day. So it looks like teams are playing hard, and at least this is my opinion, that I don't think it is boring in any way for me. So I have seen some interesting results, like Pakistan beating England and Afghanistan showing some fight in the first match and then kind of fizzling down. But the most unfortunate team, I would say, is South Africa at this point, losing all the 3 games and are kind of in a must-win situation for their next games. But you never know. The cricket is a funny game. Results can go vary, and like you never know. Like the top 4 teams can be totally different from what they look as of today. So if you want to talk about any matches in specific, the most interesting matches so far, I thought, was England-Pakistan, and even today's game was very interesting. I thought West Indies should have won it, but they kind of lost some key moments in the game, and even yesterday's game, I thought Bangladesh should have won it, but again, they lost some key moments and they lost the game. So
Okay, very well summarized the entire World Cup. But yeah, see, I don't know about all other games, with the exception of England versus Pakistan. I felt all other games are dominated. I mean, at least one-sided. Avinash, your thoughts?
Yeah, like I mentioned, so obviously what makes this World Cup interesting is the format, right? Everybody plays everybody. It's if at all there is a twist in the tale, it could very well happen thanks to the English weather. Because I remember there were some instance. I think the last World Cup that had this format was 1992, and that's the first World Cup I have somewhat of a conscious memory of. And I remember feeling rather irritated even at that age that our games against teams like Sri Lanka, which was not very strong in 1992, it was quite remarkable that 4 years later that they would go on to win the World Cup, but our match against them was washed out. I believe our game against Zimbabwe was curtailed, I think, but we won though. And I remember being the 5-year-old that I was, or 6 years old, thinking that, my God, why couldn't our games against Australia or South Africa be washed out? So you never know. Stuff like that can happen, and that can alter the balance in this World Cup as well. But otherwise, I'd say yes. South Africa's performance is certainly shocking, but you have to keep in mind that they have lost to three pretty good teams. So England pretty much outplayed them, and I think India, I wouldn't call it outplayed them, but we did have a pretty comprehensive, a decent win. And we can no longer crib about anybody losing to Bangladesh because they have made improved by leaps and bounds. So it's just been a case of three bad games for still a very good South African team. So I, it is what it is, I think. So I don't think that, yes, it's a bit of a downer, but I don't think that makes the World Cup any less interesting. To me, of the three formats, and I'll confess, I'm somebody who enjoys playing a lot more than watching. So I don't even have the patience to sit and watch a full IPL game, for that matter, with very rare exceptions. So, and I can hear some people saying, yeah, you'll watch CSK games, but still, it's, to me, the 50 over format is actually the best. The what we call the most boring period, which is basically the 20 to 40 over period in a 50 over game, I actually enjoy it because that's when a team really has to get its act together. And one thing I'm glad is that these games aren't run fests, with the exception of maybe Pakistan versus England. Most of these, and to an extent, of course, Bangladesh, South Africa. But I actually like the 250 to 300 target games, because that's where you have to be that middle period becomes very crucial. And for someone who likes strategizing or following the understanding the flow of the game, I actually enjoy watching 50 over cricket. So I'm actually looking forward to a rather interesting World Cup. And to your point about Afghanistan, yes, they have captured the imagination of a lot of people, but I have a feeling they're expecting a bit too much of the poor fellows. I mean, the fact that they're out there competing almost on an even keel is a great thing. But I have a feeling we will see them get outplayed. There might be moments when they compete, like they gave Sri Lanka a real scare, but I would still think that wouldn't be the norm. But as a completely, if you look at it from a neutral perspective, yes, you would want Afghanistan to rise and shine as soon as they can, and this to play on the grandest stage of all is a very good opportunity for them.
Okay, with that, let's get into the very, very important topic of DL, Duckworth-Lewis method. And, I think it was introduced in World Cup way long back. Is it 92? No.
No, the 92 fiasco is what led to the DL being developed.
Developed, yes. The way South Africa lost the game,
Right.
that brought in a lot of changes to DL method, I guess. Okay, with that, let's get to what is this DL method? Why? Why it has become very confusing one, especially in DCL. And I'll start with Imti. Probably, you have to answer You have to give a elaborated answer so that all our DCL folks will understand going forward.
Imti,
No,
thank
I
you.
think,
Please do the
I
honors.
think again the question is very generic as to like why DLS, and also maybe if you have something specific in mind to discuss, like how it will be used, or like, because
Yes.
there are a lot of situations that it can be used in, and like we cannot specifically cover all the situations, I think, because
Okay. So let me ask you a question.
One second,
Yeah.
Imi, I'm calling you before my next job interview. That was beautifully dodged.
No, I mean, like we were having a discussion in our WhatsApp group earlier for the show, for the topic, and it was like when Jagan asked, well, like, let's discuss about DCL. The first thing I said was like, it's a big ocean. We really cannot cover everything under DLS.
So I guess maybe this might help both of us answer the question. So Jagan, when you say why has it become particularly interesting in DCL, what do you mean? It's
because there's a lot of confusion around. See,
maybe to give some background, I think there was some discussion in the captains group after last week's games were washed out, and some of the games had results. Only like the 2 games that had results were based on.
there were 2 games that had results. Both ended up in DL way. One match is because they started late and the other group walked in. Unfortunately, that's a softball group, so they kicked our guys out, and immediately umpires applied DL method, which is understandable.
So is this the Falcons game, Jagan?
In the Falcons game, what happened was the first innings is over. Falcons scored 67, I guess. After that, rain interrupted, and they waited for 1 hour. They wanted to play, which is a good thing. And they had just 1.5 hours to complete the game. So they applied DL rule at that time. They played a 13-hour game. Basically 13 overs could be accommodated. So in 13 overs, the opposition team, I think Kings 11, they have to score 40 runs. So is that a good thing to? I mean, can we call that one as a perfect DL method? Application of perfect DL method.
I think let's take this example of this Falcons game, like the situation that you explained, and applying Duckworth Lewis to this. I think I was actually going through the rules document just before the show, and I think it is clearly mentioned in there, and I think all the points have been followed to the dot in this case, because if the game, before the game starts, if there is an interruption, then the game should be of a minimum 18 overs. That is the requirement in the DCL rule book.
Yes.
But there was no interruption in the beginning of the game. The game started as usual. So Falcons played the entire innings. They got all out. So at that point, the number of overs doesn't matter. How many overs Falcons played, right? So they got all out.
Yes.
So it is still considered as a 25-over game.
25 overs, yes. So
in the break, we had rain and the game got interrupted, right? So at that point, they waited for an hour, and then based on the remaining time, they said they will make it a 13-over game, which is again fulfilling the other requirement, saying that the second team should play half the number of overs of the first innings if there are interruptions in the game. So they calculated the revised target for 13 overs, which came out to be 40 runs. And I don't know if there were more interruptions after that point, but I think they chased down the target in 9.4 overs.
Yeah, see, game pretty much over very quickly than what the allotted time they had.
Right. So at this point, like at least looking at this sequence of events, it looks like it was a valid game for me. And whatever the umpires did for that game, I think it is commendable, and they kind of controlled and made the game happen. They played the game,
and the teams too, because nowadays a lot of teams are running away from playing. And yeah.
So my confusion was when the discussion came up in the captains group. I really didn't know the facts of the game, so that's why I did not comment much. But then I think the discussion was like, how did the teams play less than 18 overs.
Less than 80
So,
hours. Yeah.
yeah, to answer that question, I think 18 overs requirement is only at the beginning of the game and not for the second innings.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You're right in that case.
I hope we have listeners, and maybe that might answer their questions or confusion if they had any.
Okay. So, other than this, is there anything you want to add to the DL method? Suppose,
So again,
what is the minimum number of overs that we need to play in a DL method for a chase?
I think it is different for the different formats, but I'm not sure about 50 overs. But for T20, I think it was 5 overs that it is a minimum requirement that the second inning should be at least for 5 overs.
Probably, correct. I think we are missing this line in our rule book then.
I don't think so, because I went through the rule book. So, sorry, Avinash, to cut you, but
no, that's all right. I was wondering if we don't have that number.
No. The rule book clearly mentions that in case of interruptions, the second inning should be X by 2 number of overs. X being the number of overs played in the first innings. That is clearly mentioned in the rule book.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that is why I was like kind of confused when that discussion came up in the captain's group. So I think they were just looking at that one statement where it said 18 overs. And
let me give you an example here.
Right.
Okay, you can answer this one. So there's this game, and I think this one strikers versus risers. Strikers all out 37. Okay, and then rain came.
Okay.
Or they started the game, or 37 all out. They started the game, and six overs done for the second innings, and then rain came. So it should be based on the way they started. It should be minimum 12 overs game, right?
Yes, considering that the first innings was started as a 25-over game, yes, but they got all out for 37, so it's still a 25-over game at that point. And midway through the innings, if it rained, then the revised target would be set for 13 overs. Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, they could manage.
Then that doesn't mean that the second innings should go on for 13 overs at that point, because true. If the second innings, if the batting team in the second innings scores those runs in 3 overs, 4 overs, it's still a valid game.
True. I agree that. I mean, a win is a win. By then they are winning, right?
Right.
So a win is a win. Win supersedes everything. Okay,
right. So I think the confusion is when we are saying even X by 2 number of overs, it doesn't mean that the second team has to play that many overs.
That many overs, yes. See, those are the maximum overs allowed.
Yes, correct.
To finish the game.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, Avinash, you want to add anything?
Not much, actually. The only thing is, thanks to you, I actually scrambled and read up on the Duckworth-Lewis, because I really hadn't followed much about it. All I know is that it has caused problems even at our level before, where last year's summer FCC, the Michigan Cup, I think Imi would know that very well, because his team was on the receiving end of the beneficial end of the Duckworth-Lewis, because the rain came after we had even tossed, and then the rain came even before our inning started, so we had a curtailed game, and then they turned the lights off, and turns out that they were barely 2 runs ahead of where they needed to be. So which is why so it can be very controversial if we don't, because we probably don't know the situation real time in Duckworth-Lewis, unfortunately, or even if we do, I don't think we really pay attention to it. But in this case, at least in the Falcons game, I think what really hurt them was the fact that they actually played for almost 19.1 overs, and they lost all their wickets. So that went against them, because all 10 of their, or all 11 of their batsmen played, which is what, if you look at how the Duckworth-Lewis is structured, and people can Google this, which is what I did basically, but the fact that they ended up using up all their batting resource is what cost them. So, which is why we keep harping on, we should have wickets. I don't think most people understand what, we kind of vaguely know why, but this actually makes it clear. And that is why, who was the the opponent for this game, Falcons versus
Kings
Kings
11.
11. Right. So that is why Kings 11 had their target reduced to 40. At least that's my most rudimentary understanding of the Duckworth Lewis. So I don't think there was anything unfair. The fact that it was, yes, if you look at it in the larger picture, the fact that the Duckworth Lewis even came into play was unfair, but then that it is what it is, especially with the kind of weather we've been having.
Okay, one last question on this one, and we'll
I just
get
wanted to
into
add
our.
something. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Gagan.
please go ahead. Go ahead.
So yeah, the earlier situation that we discussed or whatever we have been talking about is a simple case of one interruption. But again, this Duckworth-Lewis kind of is tricky and confusing when there are multiple interruptions in the game.
Correct.
So just to add to that point, I think if there is only one interruption, I think it is straightforward that we understand that the game should be played for a minimum of 13 overs in the second innings. But then there might be a situation where the first innings happened like for the full 25 overs, and the second innings started as a 25-over game and then stopped. But the time lost is only half an hour, for example. So you're not straight away going back to 13-over target. You might still revise the target for an 18-over game or a 19-over game or a 20-over game, depending on how much time is lost.
True. It's more like every 4 minutes or 5 minutes we will
The rule book says every 5 minutes we are losing 1 over.
1 over. Yeah.
So I think the umpires should be cautious in those kind of situations where they kind of keep reducing the number of overs and don't go to 13 overs straight away as the target.
True. But in most cases, 90% of the times in our league, what happens is as soon as it rains, everybody will run off from the field, and that's it.
Right, I agree. So that's what I was saying. Like if the umpires straight away give the option of 13 overs, then that is kind of unfair for the first team that batted. And so umpires should start deducting the overs, and the minimum that they can go is 13 overs for a revised target. So maybe that should be kind of the precedent set for rain interrupted games. Hopefully we won't have more rain interruptions in the season going forward, and we might not be using the Duckworth-Lewis altogether. But I think maybe if a general communication can go out to the captains at least, probably that will make it easier for the captains and the umpires.
Okay, good. And one last question on this one. So before this DL method came into DCL, this is what we used to do. Okay, suppose it's a 25 hours game, second inning started, and then we played half of the game, for example, say 12 overs. Okay, 12.3, that's what is called a half. By then, we will keep track of every over score from the first innings at the matching point, 12.3, 12.3. Whoever scores more runs, they are going to win. It used to be very simple. Okay, but later on we brought in this DL method into DCL, which is definitely creating some issues. Now, at least after this show, probably people should not have too many issues, is what I'm hoping for. With that, let's get into our so last week 2 games happened. Okay, one is Kings 11 versus Falcons, whereas Falcons lost to Kings 11 in DL method. Falcons scored 67 runs in 19 overs, and Kings scored completed. I mean, Kings, as I said earlier, they had they had to score 40 runs in 13 overs, and they were able to score those runs in just within 10 overs. That's one match. And the other match that happened was Troy Hawks versus Lions. Troy Hawks batting first, they scored 86 runs and in 23 overs. Chasing, Lions were 78 for 9 in 16.4 overs, which they should have won very easily. But what I heard is, they kept on losing wickets one after another in very quickly. And Imti, do you want to add anything to these games?
I was just looking at the scorecard for the Troy Hawks game, and I'm not sure if it is like reflecting the correct story there, but it says Troy Hawks won the match by 8 runs by Duckworth-Lewis method. So, so the Duckworth-Lewis method set the target at that point. Is it 86? Because that would have been a full game anyways.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I don't know how they calculated this one, but this is what happened. At the 16th over, 17th over, the soft bowlers walked into the field and asked these guys to leave, and that's when the game stopped. And they did some Duckworth-Lewis method, and
Again, we really don't know
Hawks as winners by
really
8
don't
runs.
know the behind the scenes calculations in the Duckworth-Lewis, but definitely, like, I think there are multiple factors that need multiple inputs that need to be entered into that calculator, like depending on how many interruptions they had and how many wickets and all those situations. But if I'm understanding correctly, this game it had interruptions, but then again it got abruptly end, and that's why the Duckworth-Lewis was applied to it.
Yes.
It was not a revised target at that point, if I'm understanding it correct.
Mm-hmm. It's a straightforward game, no interruptions at all till the end.
Okay, so when the game stopped, they applied the Duckworth-Lewis method. So this is another case of how we can use Duckworth-Lewis method. Like we were discussing, we were talking about only interruptions, but then again, like this is kind of abrupt end to the match, and that's why Duckworth-Lewis had to be applied. So this game probably when they input the parameters, I think no interruptions, but then they at this overs, like 16.4 overs, what should the target have been for the loss of 9 wickets? And it should, I think the par score came up to be 86 at that point. So that is interesting though, but I think that is what happened there.
This is something I need to discuss with the umpires.
Well, yeah.
I don't know what happened. Full story. I need to talk to the umpires or the captains. That way, we can get more information on this one.
It could be absolutely true according to the calculator, but then it just was like eye-catching, saying that the target was same, like 86. It comes up to be 86 if the revised target is there. So
yep.
It could be the case because Lions have lost 9 wickets, right? So and Troy Hawks got all out as well. So that's probably why they were so close in terms of wicket loss. That's probably why the factor for recomputing Lions' total maybe came that close. And it's
again, perfectly, yeah. That could be the reason. Like we don't know
the reason.
Calculation.
Right.
So
that's probably why it's so coincidental.
When they called me and they said, the game stopped because of this reason, and I told him, if something like this happens, all umpires can do is give the outcome based on DL method, and this is what I see after that.
So another Avinash, just wanted to discuss more on this point, because if the par score was 86, then that means, like, if you look at just the scores, it's a tie game at that point. So there cannot be a loss or a win at that point. So that is what makes this interesting.
Correct.
I feel.
Right.
Because if you're scoring the same amount of runs, it should be a tie. So
ideally, right, exactly. Yeah, that's where I think it's we ourselves need to do a deeper dive into how this is calculated, and and basically see it could be easy if we look up a DL chart. For that matter, we might just get the answer now, but I'm not sure how to go to it, and like you said, what inputs go into it. So.
True.
And the other thing is, Troy Hawks, there's something in this for both teams to learn, though, because the Lions, I'm sure, have now learned the value of not throwing wickets away. It might have been genuinely good bowling on the part of the Troy Hawks. I'm not. I don't want them to take this as a challenge, and then because we face them this Saturday, so then they go, really? We'll show that guy who was on the radio show Thursday night.
And then we'll get a complete understanding of DLS method, Avi.
Well, and the other thing is, look at that, 30 extras, 27 wides. Again, selfishly, I hope they repeat that performance on Saturday, but it could have been a lot more comfortable for Troy Hawks had they not done that. So this game is actually a very nice game to look at. It's a classic case of how many factors probably influenced how the game went. And that's why it probably went so close.
Yeah, it could be. Okay, with that, can we get into our regular predictions?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
You
If
guys are ready?
the topics, yep, sure.
Okay, let's hope all these games happen next week. I mean, this Saturday, and weather looks good as of now. So the first game of the night is Panthers versus TCA Knights. Imti.
I think I'll give this game to Panthers. We have faced Panthers already, so I think uh, they have a good unit, so they should win it easily.
Okay, Avinash.
Same thing. Yeah, I'm banking on Panthers to win this.
Okay, the next one is FHCC versus Falcons. I think with the loss from last week, I'm thinking all their anger they'll take it on FHCC. Imti, your thoughts?
I will give the game to Falcons, but I don't think it will be a one-sided affair for sure because FHCC also will be coming back with full strength, I believe, for this game after the Ramadan period has ended. So, but I was reading Samish's comments on the predictions in the blog, and he mentioned a very good point, saying that FHCC bowling hasn't turned up yet, so they need to kind of concentrate on that, and maybe that will help them win more games if they can focus on their bowling and try to get some wickets in the process. So FHCC, if they have a good bowling unit, I think they can give a very good fight to most of the teams. But this game, I think Falcons has a good all-round unit to beat FHCC.
Okay, Avinash.
Oh, Falcons for me too.
Okay, the next one is Indus Bulls versus Rockers. Imti.
This one is a tight one to call. I'll just go with my gut feeling. I'll go with Rockers for this one.
Avi.
I'm thinking Rockers as well. I just think simply based on relative strength, I think Rockers should win this.
Okay, I'm. The next game is I'm marking this one as the game of the weekend. GLCC versus Brownstone. Okay, Imti, your thoughts?
Absolutely, two heavyweight teams, two like seasoned teams.
I would rather call two teams with oldies.
but that brings a lot of experience too. So that is the beauty of it. And like I said, it's heavyweights. So game of the week, absolutely for me. Looking at relative strengths, I haven't followed much with both the teams this season, but just looking at my knowledge of the teams with prior seasons, I think it is slightly in favor of GLCC for me. Yeah, GLCC.
Avi.
I will probably go with GLCC as well because for one, they're like wounded tigers, so I'm sure they'll be looking to get back. Brownstown is not a team to be obviously taken lightly, but I see that the game is happening at Woodhaven, where the grounds are typically are somewhat bigger than the grounds in this area, and that's where I think, even though you classified it as a game between two oldies, I would think GLCC probably might come up trumps against Brownstown there because Brownstown will find it difficult to manage, especially with the field restrictions that we have now. I think GLCC could take full advantage. So I have a feeling that GLCC might edge out Brownstown on this game. Yep.
Okay, the next game of the night is Indus Thunders versus Stingers. Imti.
Sorry, Stingers versus
Indus Thunders.
Oh, Indus Thunders all the way.
Yep.
Imti.
Hello.
Indus Thunders. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Avi.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Indus Thunders all the way.
Okay.
Yep.
The next one is Detroit Bulls versus Canton 11, and we can mark this one as another game which is going to go to wide. Imti.
This would be again another closely contested game, I believe. Both the teams have some exciting players in their ranks, but I think losing players from Detroit Bulls, I think Canton 11 for me for this game. Canton 11, yes.
Okay, Avi.
I've actually predicted Detroit Bulls to win this game because I think this is similar to what I've written on your website, saying that they did put up a somewhat decent batting effort against a full strength Glads attack last week. So that'll kind of, yes, the ultimate margin of defeat was quite heavy, but I think the Bulls will still take heart from that. And Canton 11, after quite a heavy loss to Marcos, I think they will have to do some thinking. So I don't know if they're going to go all guns blazing, which is traditionally how they do it, or if they're going to try and change their game and play more sedately. Either way, it'll be more challenging for Canton 11, I feel. So that's why my hunch is Detroit Bulls. But there's not much to go on either of these teams. So it's purely a hunch.
Okay. The next one is Blazers versus Marcos. And the interesting thing is, both empires are from same team, FCC. Unfortunately, we could not change that one because any change.
I think there was a valid reason for that. I actually had
Yes.
a chat with Vamsi.
Yes.
Because the randomization came up to be FCC umpiring an FCC Agni game, which cannot happen, and that's why they had to kind of switch it back. So it's a valid reason, and nobody should have any objection to that.
Yeah. And anyhow, I'm not asking you. I'll ask Avi.
Oh, Blazers for sure.
Okay. The next game of the night is Mustangs versus TCS Talents. This is going to be another interesting game. Into your thoughts.
Again, like I haven't seen any inspired performance from TCS Talents yet in this season. Again, thanks to like their roster, I think they have lost quite a few players to other teams, and the only known name is like Sai. I think that's
Mega Sai.
Yeah, Mega Sai. So TCS Talents is looking very tough for them, but I think with an opposition like Mustangs, they should fancy their chances. Taking nothing away from Mustangs, though, they have a very decent unit. But Indus Thunders has been a champion team and they know how to win games. So probably
no, TCS Stallions, not Indus Thunders.
Sorry. Okay,
yeah,
that was slip of the tongue. TCS Stallions should win this game, I think.
Okay, Avi.
I don't know much about Mustangs, and I know TCS Stallions have been weakened this year quite a bit, and I kind of feel for Mega Sai because he's a good player and I also like the guy. So it's so to see him battling it all alone is a bit difficult. And but just for the heck of it, I'm just going to say Mustangs. We'll see what happens.
Okay, the next game is Altair versus Knockers. I think Knockers. Any objections there?
Not at all.
No.
Okay. The next one is FCC Agni versus Safari Simti.
FCC Agni.
Avi.
2-0 or 3-0, whatever you say.
The next game is Pokeris versus Troy Hawks. I am not asking Avi here. Imti.
Pokeris will win it for sure, but looking at the performances of Troy Hawks this year, I think it is a very improved team, I would say, this year, Troy Hawks, and some inspiring performances from their players like Venu and there was another person who was consistently performing. So I think if Pokeris can handle those two, I think they should easily win this game. Okay. Pokeris is also very strong this year, so yeah.
Who are the two again, Imti?
Look at the scorecards, you should know. I think I remember Venu, but then I don't know. I can't remember the other guy.
See, Troy Hawks been playing really well, and
again, it's not just those two guys, but like just looking at the performances of the scorecards, those two have been performing consistently for the 3 games. So that's why I was just mentioning those two.
See, Pokeris are playing most attacking game this year. That's what at least I felt. And Troy Hawks, on the other way, the most improved team, and this is going to be really a real test for them, for they can get into
At least looking at the
this game will determine.
I think Troy Hawks is a very definite contender for making it to the playoff this year. At least I am feeling that way.
Okay, good. And the last game of the night is Blues versus Lions. Imti.
I'll go with Lions.
Avi.
Lions for me too, actually, yes.
Okay.
Simply based on what I saw of Blues when we played against them and what I saw of Lions, the way they played in the Spring Cup.
Okay. And see, apart from this, there is another rescheduled game happening this week. That is Strikers versus Risers. Risers almost beat Strikers in a rain-affected game. Strikers were lucky in that game, I would say. And Imti, your thoughts?
Just before that, last week, was it a case of really bad weather and bad ground conditions, or was it still a full-strength team and they did not perform well? Strikers.
I'm thinking it's a full team and they did not perform well.
Okay.
Either that, or it could be like, Risers is a, a small team and they thought they can win it easily, overconfidence.
Okay. Yeah, but again, like just going based on the strength and the roster strength, Striker should win it easily. But then again, like there might be some memories of the last encounter, like from last week. So obviously, Strikers will come back very strongly. So it should be Strikers.
Okay, Avi, you want to add anything there?
I'm going to say Strikers as well, because although Strikers did get bundled out for 37, Risers weren't doing that great in the chase as well. So they were 5 down for 17. So I'd still think on paper, at least, I'd give this to Strikers. Okay,
with that, we have completed all the predictions for this weekend games, and hopefully, I'm thinking that all games are going to happen this weekend. And with that, and I'll hand over the mic to Imti for the last words before we call it done. Imti.
I would just like to thank all the listeners to come back. Even though we didn't have much games last week for analysis, we tried to come up with some other different topics. So all credit to our listeners. So we just want to cater to our listeners, and that's why we are trying hard to come up with topics, even when we don't have games. So thanks again to the listeners. And like you mentioned, hopefully all games happen this weekend, and the weather at least looks good for now. And I think it's in high 80s, if I'm not wrong. So probably sudden change of weather, players need to be a little cautious also. So all the best to all the playing teams, and good luck.
Okay, Avinash.
Well, as always, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure joining in.
Actually, I must say thank you to you, because you accepted my request in the last second. Okay, I'm really very, very thankful to you.
Oh, no problem at all. It's my pleasure, and I think I kind of lucked out where it's a bit of an easy week where not many games happened last week, and the predictions were somewhat straightforward for the coming weekend. So yeah, it's thankfully it worked out well, and I'm glad I was able to step in today. And it's always a pleasure being on the show with Imti, who, with every time I listen to him, my admiration for him only grows. And of course, I'm very glad to all the listeners that tune in week after week and support the show. I think Jagan, you yourself do a great job putting the show together. So it must be supported, and I'm glad to see that it is supported. And it's always a pleasure talking to the community at large. So good luck to all the teams, and let's hope, like Jagan said, that we'll get a full weekend of cricket in.
Okay, thank you, Imti. Thank you, Avinash. And with that, we will conclude tonight's show. Keep listening DCL Talk Show on DCL Radio. Good night, all.